So with cross-site request forgery, CSRF, this one is a little more difficult to protect with the WAF, just because ultimately what you're attempting to achieve is to take over an existing session or basically manipulate something in the middle, but ideally it should be a 100% considered a legitimate request. And the WAF by nature is designed to look for illegitimate requests in a textual nature, not necessarily a session-based nature. Now, some WAFs, including the F5, do offer a session-based tracking solution, but we're not going to talk about that today. Again, more advanced topics. And yeah, we're just talking basics. So here we've got the ability to change your password. Yeah, we'll kind of go with that because we're already logged in. So new password. Most secure one ever. All right, so we'll go and change that. Please don't save that. And here we can see that, essentially it was a GET request, and our URL contains the parameters. Horrible, horrible practice. Please don't ever do this. And if you ever catch it, yell at your developers. But nonetheless, we're proof of concept moving through this. So we have a password new and password confirm, and then our change function, which relates to the change button. And of course, we have our hash symbol again. So we'll take that into consideration. Now we also have this form here, test credentials. So developer tools, and let's get Jim Bob back in here. Now, just for fun, this one doesn't appear to have limitations on characters. So we'll take that into consideration. And then our password, let's type something. Gotta love those home keys. And then we'll go ahead and log in. Now take note, this one actually does a post. So there we have a post. And we'll kind of expand this here. So we get the wrong password for Jim Bob Jones. Big shocker. It was just a guess anyways. But nonetheless, we'll go ahead and look down here in the actual request. And here we have the username and password parameters. So, and also the login function relative to the button for that matter. Take note, didn't post it in the URL because again, we got a post request this time. And we can go and look at it further raw just to make sure what kind of format this is because the URL did decode that for us. So in this case, we know it's a standard post body versus, say, a JSON request. So we can create some protections around username and password and login as well. Again, the protection here that we can provide with the WAF basic aspect is only going to be manipulation of the fields. So, command injection, SQL injection, things like that. What we cannot do is protect a valid versus invalid session within this context. Now, again, additional features, there are other abilities to take care of this, but for WAF basics, we're just going to focus on, well, the basics. And we'll cover the advanced stuff in a future video. So moving on with this, we'll go ahead and go back to our F5, our WAF, and we'll go ahead and create several parameters. And for the heck of it, we'll go ahead and create our URLs. So we got our first one here. And rinse and repeat. And then we can come over to here and we'll also do the test credentials again, just to make sure the URL is the same, or maybe it's not. Let's find out. And as we saw earlier, no, it's not the same. So we have two URLs to create today for this set. So we'll come back over here. And we'll go create another URL. I know, so exciting. And we'll do a wildcard again. So now that is created, we'll go ahead and create our parameters. Now, we could create the list of password current, password new, password conf, and password. Or we could potentially create some wildcards. So let's actually create a wildcard. Unfortunately, we will have to create two, but it's 2 versus 4. So we'll do password current, and because each one is password current, and then new, and then conf. So the consistent part that we can keep static is password underscore. Then we could do the wildcard as the conf or new or current. And make sure we select wildcard. Staging, don't worry about. Allow empty value. Well, kind of required, but for the sake of refreshing the page or something to that effect, we won't punish our users. So we'll allow that. Repeated, this should not occur. Some web apps are vulnerable to repetition, so they'll look at essentially the last repeated instance versus the first one. So that's where you can potentially get around things. So we'll just kind of enforce this aspect. And then back to the password typical length of 32, we'll go ahead and enforce that. Now, a password tends to allow any typable character on the keyboard. So we'll go ahead and essentially allow any typable keyboard, but things like line feed, tab, while they're typable on the keyboard, they're not typable within a single line user input field. Now tab is, but because tab is considered a white space, it's often not allowed as a password. Not to mention tab within a web form usually will take you to the next field. So like password, it would probably, if you hit tab there, probably take you to the login button or submit it or whatever it is. Essentially the next field though. And if you hit shift tab, you can go back to username just for, or maybe the radio button. One case, tab essentially is a non-typable character for the input aspect. So the ability for you to type tab within there is impossible. So therefore we can naturally disallow it. Versus say a comment field sometimes will allow you to enter a tab. So we would have to allow it potentially there. Obviously we didn't earlier, but wasn't important because usually not common to enter a tab anyways. So moving on, password will allow space because some password systems won't allow it, but some will. We don't really know, but we'll just go ahead and allow it. And allowed by default, so whatever. Now, select these ones. Now to our evil characters, the ones we hate the most, script tags. Unfortunately, we do have to allow this. Now, some password policies will actually not allow those characters, but we'll go ahead and assume that we want to allow the user to have a secure password, and we don't want to imply that, well, our security sucks, so we don't allow script tags just because we're not sure. Versus having a confident posture, we can actually allow these because we have other methods of detection and controls. So we can actually confidently allow these script tags. And once we add our ability with attack signatures, then we can mitigate those cross-site scripting and etc. types of attacks. So this will do for as good as we can get without signatures and still be fairly effective. But again, we can't enforce the session aspect of whether it's a successful or unsuccessful password. So moving on, disallow, or wait, no, I'm sorry. Almost did that. So we'll keep all these as allow versus disallow, which we almost did right there, because we're, well, allowing these. Don't screw that up. Now, take note, we now have name metacharacter control because we created the wildcard here. So this offers the ability for the attacker to potentially create their own parameter names and potentially roll with that. And this defines what characters would be allowed within the context. And you could actually say something to the effect of, if these characters are present in the parameter name, then do not allow it. And this also which is actually done by default, for that matter. We can kind of cover that real quick. That's under character set parameter name. Not go ahead and pull that up here. And here you have your character set by default, whether it's allow or disallow. Same thing with the values. So there you go. Not gonna really get in depth with that one. So we're gonna come over here and we're gonna define what needs to be allowed or not allowed. So these ones are allowed by default, but because what we're covering here for the parameter is very specifically after underscore, for that matter, new, current, and conf. In other words, confirmation short. So only words, alphanumeric. So we'll go ahead and allow the typical alphanumeric anyways, but we're going to actually deny these. We don't miss it. And there we go. Now take note, the name characters are a lot more locked down by default, but nonetheless, and just for a little stringency, we'll go ahead and disallow those. And don't forget, let's see, empty. Yep, we already covered that. So cool. Now we can go ahead and create that. So that covers our 3 parameters. Now we have the password one because there is no underscore, and even if there was, still, if it was just underscore, because there is the asterisk, asterisk does require character. So we just need to create the password specifically. All right. Form staging. We'll repeat. Lock it down to 32 length. Check characters. And need to allow. And ta-da. All right. We'll create that one. Now the next one we need to create is going to be username. And we'll do the same 128 as we did earlier for the IDs. And certainly we could create a regular expression for like an email address or potentially a normal user ID, but it's not exactly necessary. This should be adequate enough, but if you really want to go that route, go for it. It's not necessarily a bad idea, but computational cost versus reward, especially given the context of the length and character limitation, might not be such a benefit given the complexity of creating that regular expression and having to know a lot of aspects of your login versus we can actually get away with a lot of assumptions here. The regular expression would require a lot more in the know, but would it hurt to reach out to your app dev? Probably not. But do they always know? Not necessarily. Another topic for another day. Moving on. So username, spaces normally aren't allowed. So we'll go and deny those. No exclamation marks, no hashes. And then these, not allowed. Dashes, certainly possible. And no questions. No carrots. Could be a joke about that one, but nope. And we'll come down and sure, we'll go ahead and take out the comma. And we'll leave the plus. Well, sometimes I've seen instances where a plus is actually valid, so we'll go ahead and leave that. The equal symbol, I've had complications with this with certain apps, so I just kind of let it be by default. But if we want to really lock it down, we can go ahead and take it out. But there's a lot of more to explain on that one than worth necessary for this video. So that's the reason why we've completely skipped over it the entire time. Just kind of FYI. So moving on to disabling. Get that flow going. And we are good to go. All right. So as far as it goes, that's as best we can do with the WAF in protecting this web app. So we can only really prevent tampering and malicious activity. Again, we can't protect the session aspect directly with these features, but there are other features such as, like in our case, we have the session tracking, and then also we have bot protection and bot defense, actually, protection depending on the product. So some of those offer additional aspects, but again, advanced features that we will not cover in this case today. So that one's covered. Next, we're going to move on to weak session IDs.